Welcome and thank you for joining today's Section 184, Back to Basics. Before we begin, please ensure you have opened the WebEx chat panel by using the associated icon located at the bottom of your screen. Note that all audio connections are muted at this time. If you require technical assistance, please send a chat to the event producer. You may submit a written question at any point during the call, and it will be addressed at a later point. With that, I'll turn the conference over to Krista Johnson, Director of the Office Loan Guarantee. Please go ahead.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to ONAP's Back to Basics training. I'm Krista Johnson, the Director of the Office of Loan Guarantee, here in the Office of Native American Programs at HUD. I have had the pleasure of meeting or talking with some of you over the years, and ONAP is delighted to have so many of you join our session today. Before we get started, I want to introduce you to the heart and soul behind the Office of Native American Programs. Many of you may know the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Native American Programs, Heidi Frechette, already. She continues to be a tireless advocate for Native American borrowers. Heidi is committed to you and these lending programs, and I'm excited that she is able to join us today. It is my privilege to introduce you to Heidi Frechette. Heidi?
Great. Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Krista. So welcome and thank you all for joining us for this special two-day Section 184 webinar. I know many of you know that this was supposed to take place in Washington, D.C., but due to the coronavirus pandemic, in accordance with CDC guidelines on social distancing, we've changed it into an online webinar. So I want to thank you so much for your flexibility. I'm excited and encouraged by the interest we've seen in this important training. Today, you are joined by almost 300 direct guarantee loan professionals from around the country. This training will help give you all a better understanding of the Section 184 program and discuss in detail policies related to endorsement, servicing, and claims processing. As you know, Krista Johnson, our Director of Loan Guarantee, and her team, they will walk us through some of the policies, provide you with some real-life examples, and address your questions. So I hope you enjoy today's training. I also, on a personal note, hope that everyone is staying safe and healthy, and as ever before, we're committed to bringing homes to Native American families. So with that, I want to pass it back over to Krista to start our day. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. So the Office of Loan Guarantee, OLG, as we call ourselves, has a lot of information to share with you today. We have not had the opportunity to review our programs with our lending partners for a very long time. There have been significant staffing fluctuations and changes in OLG over the past 2 years. As I am sure, there have been a lot of changes for all of you. We recognize for us to perform better in our role, we need to renew our relationship with you, our partners, and refresh our understanding and expectations of each other. Today, this is our goal. With your help, we, ONAP, OLG, can provide you with outstanding customer service, which will in turn enhance the experience of Native borrowers. We have a lot to cover today, but I would like to take just a few minutes to review why we all show up to work every single day. HUD's mission is to create strong, sustainable, inclusive communities and quality, affordable homes for all. The Section 184 Indian Home Loan Guarantee Program is an important component of this mission. This program is a home mortgage product especially designed for American Indian, and Alaska Native families, Alaska villages, tribes, or tribally designated housing entities. Congress established the program in 1992 to facilitate homeownership and increase access to capital in Native American communities. The Section 184A program is a twin program available to Native Hawaiians. Providing quality, safe, and affordable housing is an essential component of reservation economic development and Native community well-being. It supports a healthy, educated, trained workforce. Mostly, it strengthens Native people's ties to their history, to their land, and to their language and culture. Knowing each day that there is a Native family connected to that loan file we are working on, even though we don't have any direct contact with that borrower, provides a deep feeling of satisfaction that we too are contributing to making the world a better place. All right, next slide, please. Today, you'll have an opportunity to hear from many of our OLG team members, but I want to briefly introduce you to them. Jake Corey, Roy Schaefer, Andrika Wagstaff, Mansour Dean, Thelma Pillay, and Kevin Hickey. In addition to these team members, Brian Cook will be the primary speaker for our first half of the presentation, and you'll see Brian's photos shortly. Now I want to introduce you to Jeff Glass. Jeff is OLG's Deputy Director. He joins us from the USDA's Rural Development Office and comes to us from Nevada. Jeff has a lot of great experience, and we are very pleased to have him join our team. Thank you again for joining us today, and I give you Jeff Glass. Jeff?
Thank you, Krista. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our training, and thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to first thank you for being so flexible given the impact of COVID-19, and remind you all that guidance did go out in the form of Dear Lender letters regarding COVID-19. You can find the details on Code Talk in the lender section. I will speak to you a little bit more about that later, but for the purpose of endorsements, please remember to ensure that you document the files regarding any COVID-19 exceptions. Just want to make sure I pointed that out. And now, without any further ado, I present to you today's first speaker, our superstar DG underwriter trainer, Brian Cook. Brian?
Thank you, Jeff. Folks, I want to also just say thank you for taking the time to attend the first portion of this endorsement package training. Many of you I have either communicated with, and some I've even had the pleasure of meeting, and I'm glad that I chose to join Office of Loan Guarantee 8 months ago, and I truly am glad I'm able to help the community with my lending partners. So with that, I'd like to go over and discuss what our goals are with this training. Next slide, Neil. So real quick, our purpose of today's training is to facilitate and make sure that we're all working towards the end goal of you receiving that loan guarantee certificate. A lot of lenders ask me, and through conversations, you know, they send in these packages. They're not sure what happens when those packages come into the office. So I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. When we receive these packages from our lenders and that do offer those Section 184, those loans are then logged into the system, and then they are distributed among the loan guarantee specialists within the office. Our goal is to ensure that every lender that is submitting their file, that we receive those in the same manner. This will expedite and speed up the process for the review of that file and getting what is most important, that loan guarantee certificate, back to our lending partners. So the one thing that I would like to touch on is when the specialist reviews that file, and if it happens to be missing documentation, that specialist will then communicate with the individual that has been designated as the contact on that file with a deficiency request. Those deficiency requests will then, we do request that those get sent in within 48 hours. That will allow us to, again, get back on the process of issuing that loan guarantee certificate in a timely manner. If there are no deficiencies, the loan specialist will send out the loan guarantee certificate again to the contact designated within that file. All this is designed to expedite the process for getting you the loan guarantee certificate. With that being said, the proper place to start would be we have a left and a right side of a binder. And what I'd like to do is go ahead and begin with the right side of the binder. Neil, can we go ahead and on the first item that I do want to talk about on the top of the binder on the right-hand side is the lender submission contact sheet. Now, this sheet is available on the Office of Loan Guarantees lender site. You can download that and use the one that we supply. You can also, but you are not required to use that particular contact sheet. What we do ask is that the sheet must be completed and turned in. If you choose to use your own sheet that the lender generates, then that particular sheet does need to contain some important information to facilitate that communication back. And as we'll see with the next slide there, on the slide that you see there is a sample. Again, this sample is the sample that you can obtain off of the lender's Section 184 site. And as I mentioned before, you're not required to use this specific form, but if you do decide to design your own form, what we do ask that you include some certain information, beginning with, of course, the lender name. Now, the lender name is important for us so that we can determine which lender that we are working with, followed by the individual submitter's name, and along with the submitter's phone number and submitter's email. That is the point of contact that we are going to communicate with if there is any additional information that we need in that file to complete the loan guarantee certificate. Again, if you're designing your own lender contact sheet, please make sure that it does include the case number along with the cohort, the spelling of the borrower's name as it appears on the note, and any and all co-borrowers that are on that transaction. We then would like you to also include the tribal affiliation and then the submission type, whether it is a firm commitment or a loan guarantee. As you know, in some cases, some of these files are being submitted for review by the DD trainer to issue that commitment if you happen to be a lender that is in the training phase. We do need on that submission lender form the type of land transaction, whether it is a fee simple, tribal trust, or allotted or individual trust. This will help us determine when assigning those files out for review that they get to the appropriate people. And then with that being said, what I would like to do is introduce you to Kevin Hickey, and he will go over the next item that will be in the file, which is the type of identification. Kevin?
So thank you, Brian. Hello, everyone. I joined HUD in February this year, and I've spoken and emailed some of you on the call today, and I'm very excited to be here and work with OLG. So we're on the right side of the binder now, and that's, I want to talk about a few things regarding identification. On tribal IDs, we've seen sometimes that we're getting copies of copies, and it's not necessarily clear enough for us to read the card from the borrower. It's very important that the file document that the borrower is a member of a federally recognized tribe. That's a critical component of documentation for the file. So, and our policy does state that if we can't make a guaranteed loan to a member who is to a loan applicant who is not a member of a federally recognized tribe. So we understand that in the community there are commonly a certificate of degree of Indian blood, CD/IB cards. These cards are acceptable if the enrollment number is on them, but if there is no enrollment number for the tribe, that card in and of itself is not the only is not acceptable. We need a document with the enrollment number. And also some cards have expiration dates, some do not, but the ones that do, it's important to make sure that we have a card with a date that is current as of the date of the loan guarantee certificate. So that's just important to note. And then just keep in mind that again, just to emphasize that the borrower has to be a member of a federally recognized tribe. Next slide, please. These are examples of tribal cards and identification documents. The top card, the top document shows that it's a certificate, but it has no enrollment number. The other two example cards are examples of cards that have expiration dates, and if they do, they need to be current as of the date of the note. And we have to make sure that any tribal enrollment number is clear and valid and legible for us for our file review. Next slide, please. These are in the file, the U.S. government photo ID. Sometimes these come in unreadable. Again, if they're copies of copies, that sometimes we lose the information necessary, so they have to be legible. You have to make sure also that the document is still current and not expired when the endorsement package is reviewed. And these are just examples. These examples here are from example photos, so they're not actually valid documents here. So next slide, please. The Social Security number is required for all borrowers, and we often get this information through the pay stub or a copy of a W-2. Again, we're looking for legibility on these types of documents. Some pay stubs and W-2s may have the Social Security number redacted. As long as the last four numbers are shown, that's acceptable. We also see copies of the actual Social Security card issued by the Social Security Administration. That, of course, is a valid way to convey this information in the file. Some lenders also use a third-party verification service like TransUnion or Equifax, and those, of course, are acceptable as well. So you have in the slide there the examples of the documentation that we accept, and just wanted to, that's it for this slide, and from at this point I'm going to pass the presentation on to Brian.
Thank you, Kevin. I really do appreciate that. The following slide that you see that comes up there, and sometimes which does cause a delay for you receiving that loan guarantee certificate, is the missing of the proof of the loan guarantee fee being paid. As you're aware, there is a 1.5% upfront fee that does need to be paid. There are some exceptions that happen where the lender did not get that paid within the 15 days of the closing date as well. I want to bring to your attention, if that does happen to take place where you're not able to go on pay.gov and pay that 1.5% guarantee fee within that 15-day period, we do need to see the receipt of the 4% late fee. So as you're packaging these endorsement packages and you happen to look at the dates and you say, oh, we're a little late on this one, let's go ahead and get that receipt in here so it doesn't hold up on getting that loan guarantee certificate. So please pay attention to those dates as well. Now, what I did do here, if some of you aren't sure of the process on pay.gov and following that, I've added a link into this presentation that you can follow to get to the actual PowerPoint training for making those payments to pay.gov. What I do have on the next slide is a sample of what the receipt should look like. This is an emailed receipt that you received back from pay.gov. Of course, the information has been redacted for safety purposes. But as we're reviewing this file, and as somebody who does review these files, I'm going to look to make sure that this receipt is in there, and then I'm going to take a look at the date that this was received, and then I'm going to look at that closing date to make sure that it's within that 15 days. If it's not within that 15 days and I don't have that additional receipt in there for the 4% late fee, then I will have to send out a deficiency request on that. Now, some lenders, when you're making that payment on pay.gov, some lenders do take the time to enter a reference information, which actually will print out on that receipt as well. And usually what I see on those reference information is the borrower's name and the actual case number to this to the payment that's being made. So that does help us in case any loose papers happen in transit to be able to make sure we get that back into the right file. Moving on to the next slide, what I'd like to discuss something is the HUD form 50131. Now this can also be found on the Section 184 lender's website, or you can actually go to HUD Clips and download that by using the form number 50131. Currently, the process that is followed on this is the lenders will send in the request for the case number to the Section 184's mailbox. Once when we receive it at the office and we issue that case number, we're going to send back the actual confirmation with the case number. So inside your stacking and endorsement package, what you want to do is have your case number request, and then followed by that, directly after that, is the actual case number issuance from the Office of Loan Guarantee, which I was able to go ahead and add on the next slide some examples of those. And on this slide, you know, one thing that you do see is, of course, the sample that you can get from HUD Clips or from the lender site, but wanted to take a little sidetrack from the endorsement package, since what I'm about to cover would have already been addressed and resolved prior to this endorsement package coming in. But what does delay on often on receiving that case number back when it is requested is some information that's missing. So just wanted to take a minute of your time and cover that. Quite often, first thing that I see missing is the TIN, the tax ID number. We do need that filled out. That TIN number is going to identify the lender that is requesting that case number. Followed by that, what I do commonly see is the lender does not list the sponsoring agent. Now, in that particular case, now, you may be a DG lender, and your brokers or correspondent lenders are issuing these case numbers and sending those forms on. So I would just ask that you take a minute to disseminate out to those individuals that we need to know that sponsoring lender. So if it is 123 Mortgage and they're sponsored by ABC Mortgage, we just want to make sure that we are issuing that sponsorship to the right individual. Sometimes that comes in from that broker and it's missing the sponsoring lender, so we actually have to take the time and kick that back, and delays on them getting that case number. The next thing that I often see and experience when these come in is the item 6 on the form, which is the when you're having a streamlined refinance. Now, we all know that you're probably seeing an uptick in refinances, particularly in streamlined refinances with the way the market is going right now. We do need that previous case number included. We will research it and make sure that it's valid so that they do qualify for the streamlined refinance. So please take the time to list the previous case number in there for us. The following item that is commonly missed on this form is the bottom section when it is a tribal trust and allotted or individual trust. What is commonly missed is the BIA confirmation and track number. We cannot issue this case number without that information, which again will cause a delay on you as a lender receiving this case number back, because we're going to reject this request and ask for a new submission. And then finally on this particular form is the condominium information. As you're aware, it has to be an approved project for us to be able to offer loan guarantees on. So please make sure that that information is included. As before, if it is a condominium and we don't have the information, we are going to reject this and send that back to get that information. The document on the right-hand side is the actual case number issuance form, which, as I mentioned before, should be right behind the request form. Moving on to the next slide. What I'd like to do is pass this on to Roy Schaefer. Roy, please cover this.
All right. Thank you, Brian, and thank you to everyone participating with us today. I'm going to be talking about the Section 184 Direct Guarantee Reservation of Funds Request, or HUD Form 50143. When we receive this form properly completed, we issue the Section 184 Loan Guarantee Reservation of Funds form, which does include the cohort number. Like other lender forms, you can locate HUD Form 50143 on the lender page of Section 184. You can also locate this form on HUD Clips, or like most HUD forms, you can also just Google it and you will get to it. When we receive the Section 184 Loan Guarantee Reservation back in the endorsement package, we check to make sure the form is signed by an approved DG underwriter. If this is a test case, the supervising underwriter must also sign along with the trainee. And it helps if you print your name below the signature so we know who is signing it. If the form is not properly signed, we will notify you to correct this, and that obviously can delay issuing the LGC. The next slide, please. Thank you. And you see both of those forms there, the reservation and the guarantee. So now I'm going to go through the information we require on the form 50143, talk about how we want the information presented, and go over some of the issues we see that can hold up the approval. Now, as a general note, unless an item is not applicable, all information requested on the form must be included. And also, if you're giving us a handwritten submission, please make sure that the handwriting is clear. So I'll just go through this line by line. The Section 184 case number, this must be the complete 9-digit case number. The originating lender name should be the full lender name. Sponsor name, if you have a sponsoring lender, and Brian alluded to this, it must be identified here. Please don't assume we know who your sponsor is, even if you only have one sponsor. The DG underwriter name, we need this along with their email in case we need to contact them with any questions. The borrower name or names should be exactly as they appear on the note, and this is very important because that is how we reserve the funds. The tribal affiliations, they must be included for the primary borrower and also for any co-borrower who is also a tribal member. And it helps us if you put the tribal affiliation exactly how it appears on the tribal ID card. The property address, again, this should be exactly as it appears on the note. And now we're going to just go through the boxes by rows. The loan purpose, we need to know the loan purpose just like we do for a case number request. So if it is a refi, please include the type of refinance that is being requested. The sale price or acquisition cost, if this is for a purchase, please make sure the purchase price is correct. Land type, that would be fee simple, tribal trust, or allotted trust. The next three boxes, remaining economic life, effective appraisal date, and appraised value, those should all come directly from the appraisal. Mortgage amount without and with LG fee. If the borrower is not financing the LG fee, these amounts should be the same. Also, again, the mortgage amount with the LG fee must agree with the note amount. Mortgage hazard and flood insurance. For this box, we need you to total the hazard and flood insurance, if applicable. Also, for this box and the next one, which is mortgage real estate taxes, please remember to use monthly amounts in these boxes. Sometimes we see annual amounts, and that is literally 12 times the amount that should be included. The term, please confirm this is correct. Sometimes we know the term changes before the cohort is issued. And also, please note that in this box, we're looking for the term in years and not in months. Monthly other should include anything else associated to the payment, like HOA fees. And again, this is a monthly amount. The interest rate, just confirm that you are using the correct net rate, and that also agrees with what will be in the note. The monthly premium payment, that should come from the McCaw. And the next two issues, the BIA reservation code and BIA track number. If this is a tribal or allotted trust land loan, you must complete these boxes. And as Brian mentioned, you should already have this information since you needed it when you requested your case number. And the last line, the reservation of funds amount requested, just make sure that amount is correct and is entered for the total amount of the reserve request. And the next slide, please. The next slide. Thank you. So this is a memo that we released back in November of last year, and it discusses our policy that the reservation of funds request should be submitted immediately after acceptance of the final CD by the borrower. And the purpose of this is to cut down on the number of change requests. And our policy is that we commit to a 24-hour turnaround to process any changes you may need following. So thank you for your time, and I'll give this back to Brian.
Thank you very much, Roy. I appreciate that. One thing I do want to note is on that reservation of fees confirmation that actually lists your cohort on there. We do need the signature on that from the DG underwriter. And if there was if that particular underwriter is going through the test case phase, the DG trainer as well will need to sign that form. Sometimes what ends up happening is we will receive that endorsement package, and it will be missing that signature, so we end up having to issue a deficiency request because of that signature. The next thing that I did want to cover is the McCaw on the next slide. Now, the McCaw can be obtained from the Section 184 lender site, Along with that, directly below that same link is the instructions on how to complete the McCall. And, once when you download that spreadsheet, I would recommend that you not save it to your desktop because changes do take place, and when they do take place, that link will be updated appropriately. What I'd like to do, just as before, is just take a few minutes on the next slide and talk about the McCall worksheet in particular. What you will have on what you see on your screen right now is a sample of the McCall. Please keep in mind that this document needs to reflect the information within the package. This is the primary document that we're reviewing initially as to why the underwriter approved this transaction. So it does need to be accurate. It does need to be updated in case, for example, if the loan amounts change at the last minute, the underwriter absolutely needs to update the McCall to reflect that. When we receive the file, and some reasons that we do end up having to put it on a deficiency request, some common areas that I see that take place on the McCall is with the current housing expenses are being left blank. When we're reviewing the file, there may be a VOR in there, and that VOR is not matching the current housing expense, whether it's off or, as I mentioned, commonly I'll see that screen left blank. We do need that box filled out. It is something that we are looking at. The next box is whether or not they're a first-time home buyer or not. Now, with the first-time home buyer information, we like to know how successful the program is doing, how successful it is helping the communities, and we do want to know when these individuals are first-time home buyers so that we can get the proper analytics on that. This information should be easily obtained off of the HUD Form 501111, which we'll discuss later. But that is one of the questions that does need to be asked is whether or not these individuals are first-time home buyers. The next box that is commonly missing or misstated is the Section 184 mortgage limit. I've had a few conversations through the past 8 months with different individuals. I do want to bring your attention that this is not going to mirror FHA limits. We have our county limits for the Section 184. So since this is a manual input on the McCall, please take the time to take a look at that county, make sure that that is matching the current county limits that are published. This, without that being put in accurately, it could affect the McCall worksheet since it's using that as a calculation. The next item that we see is the asset items. Sometimes this is not matching the documentation within the file. It might say there's $3,000 or $5,000 worth of assets listed on the McCall, but then when we're reviewing the documentation within the file, there's, $8,000 or $9,000. So we do want this to reflect accurately on what you as the underwriter made the decision on. Followed by the McCall, followed by the asset is often the income documentation. Very often I'll see these rounded to round numbers. We all understand that happens in some cases, but we do want whatever you determined as the underwriter from your income flow analysis, we do want that in there. So please take the time to put that in there. Followed by the income gross amount is the total fixed payments. Now, this should have been obtained from the credit report, but it's not always going to be all-inclusive off of that credit report. There might be child support payments. There might be alimony, or even you might have to do some calculations on your student loans. So we want to make sure that you're doing the right calculations because, of course, that's going to reflect in the debt to income when you get to there. Moving on to the next box is the total seller contributions. We do need this to be accurate. You know, if the seller originally was contributing $1,100 and then when I'm reviewing or somebody's reviewing the closing disclosure, we might see $3,000 or $5,000 in there. Please update the McCall to match what the CD is and so that it reflects correctly as well. Followed by that, you know, as I mentioned, is the DTI, which can be affected by those total payments, but we are going to do our calculations to make sure that we're in agreement with the underwriter on the debt to income calculations. We have a section on this McCall which is important, which is the next box, the comment section. As you all know, our debt to income limit is 41%, but you are allowed to take that up to 43% with 2 compensating factors. We do need you to put in your reasons why that you made that decision, what this comment section is there. One thing that we'd like to encourage everyone to do, we see it with a number of our lenders, we'd like to expand it if we can, is a quick write-up from the underwriter as to the decisions that they made. You know, I'm going to date myself a little bit on this, but back in the day, we always had 5 C's in these files. They had to be in there. They had to, you know, give the reasons why we made the decisions that we made. So we strongly encourage that every underwriter put in the decisions why they made the decision that they did and touch on that. Followed by the comment section, and sometimes is missed, is the signature. If that is not signed, keep in mind the underwriter signing and dating this McCall worksheet tells me that based on that date and that time, that underwriter made the decision to approve this loan. As before, if this is a DG, a test case, we do ask that the DG trainer also sign the McCall. Moving on to the next slide. Sometimes you'll have a situation where the McCall needs to be accompanied with some documentation. For example, you might have a single construction loan or a rehab loan, so that single close max form needs to be included. As we go forward in today's market, we're going to see a lot of streamlines as we talked about. We definitely need the net tangible benefits on every streamlined refinance. The next slide that will come up is the worksheets themselves. On the left-hand side, you'll see that the single close worksheet. One area that I often see that I do have to ask for additional clarification is in the box of the comments. So the underwriter is given this box to fill out and input any additional information that they need or they deem for making that decision and think that we need to be aware of as well. Followed by the signing of the document. These documents that do come in, there are sometimes that this is missing a signature. So when you're preparing this package in for an endorsement, please make sure that you're taking a look and seeing that underwriter did sign the form. If not, just have them sign it prior to that coming in. On the net tangible benefit worksheet, this is important that the borrower does sign this document. So please include the net tangible benefit in those documents that the borrower signs. On files that we do receive the net tangible benefits, borrower signature is missing. I, of course, am going to turn around and request that that gets signed and returned back to us. Moving on to the next slide is the amortization and annual fee schedule. Every loan that Section 184 does that has a loan-to-value greater than 78%. So if it's 78.01, the fee schedule needs to be in the document or in the endorsement package. This particular document, I do want to make sure that everybody understands this is a living, breathing document. It needs to stay with that file. If you happen to be selling this loan, that lender that has purchased the loan has to be aware of that mortgage insurance that is being charged on this particular loan so that they can make sure that those continue to be applied appropriately. This form is also required to be signed by the borrowers. So please make sure that your borrowers are signing this so they understand, they fully understand that there is a mortgage insurance on the property, or on the loan, and when it will be dropping off. The next slide is as you can see, is just a sample of the McCall. I'm sorry, of the amortization fee schedule. So this can actually be obtained from the McCall worksheet. So when you're working through your McCall, this is something that you'll have to obtain, make sure that the borrowers are able to sign. For prepping the package and sending it in for endorsement, and please just make sure that signature is there. Followed by the amortization schedule should be your note, which is the next slide there that you see. Now, the one thing that we are going to look at, we are still reviewing paper files, so we are going to look for the stamp from the lender that states that this is an original and correct copy. Please continue to do that. Make sure that we're aware that that's there. The other thing that we are going to do is compare that the information matches up with the McCall and the other information within there. We're going to read the note entirely, but some high-level look at it. We're going to make sure that that principal and interest amount and the lender's name are matching up with the McCall worksheet. Moving on to the next document that should be in that file is the mortgage. Within the mortgage, we also want that stamp that is a correct copy from the original. We're going to review the document, and we're also going to be looking for the riders that the individuals. Now, we all know that there should be a Section 184 rider within the documentation, but there may be other riders that apply as far as the PUD rider or the condominium rider. Please make sure the appropriate riders are checked, because by checking those, saves you on having to stamp those documents as well, because they are incorporated within the mortgage. Now, the next slide, next couple slides actually, that I just wanted to touch on is the riders themselves. Sometimes I'll receive and be reviewing a file that might have the incorrect rider. You know, if it's a fee simple, there should not be a leasehold rider in there. So please make sure that the type of rider that was used for the transaction is the correct one before sending that endorsement package in. We want to make sure that we can get to issuing that loan guarantee certificate to you in a timely manner. What you see on your screen is the fee simple rider and the leasehold rider that can be obtained off of HUD clips for you. The next slide down is your individual allotted trust with no lease rider, and then also the non-borrowing rider as well. I'm sorry, so with I did want to talk a little bit about that as well. When you have housing authorities that are doing the transactions, please make sure that the proper rider is being used. You know, the housing authority isn't going to be occupying the property. So, you know, please make sure that we're utilizing the right riders for that. Moving on to the next slide. Loan estimates. Loan estimates, we need the initial loan estimate and the most recent one signed or acknowledged by the borrower. And what I mean by acknowledge is I know a lot of lenders nowadays are using DocuSign and other approved signing systems. So we do need to see that documentation that the borrower was made aware through the loan estimate being issued in a timely manner. We are going to check that the trade regulations were followed and that the borrower was aware of what is shoppable and non-shoppable. So please make sure, often we'll receive these files without the loan estimate. So I know they're being done, but it delays on us issuing that loan guarantee certificate because we have to turn around and issue a deficiency request asking for that loan estimate. The next slide is just your sample of your loan estimate. I'm not going to go into too much detail with this. We all understand what the loan estimate is. This particular sample you can obtain off of CFPB's website if you needed it for any training purposes with your loan officers and stuff. Moving on to the next slide is your closing disclosure. We do need all 5 pages of the CD. Please, page 1, 2, and 4, page 1, 2, and 5, please make sure that they're all included. If they're not all included, we are going to have to issue a deficiency request and get those. Now, just like the LE, we're going to need that initial CD and proof of delivery and the final CD. We're going to double check all the information that's through the file, and of course we're going to utilize that CD for that purpose as well. So please make sure that's included. The following two slides is just the sample that, again, you can obtain off of CFPB's website, but this is a sample of the closing disclosure. Now, one thing I will note, I often will see on these closing disclosures where there's a tribal grant that's listed on the CD, but it was not listed on the McCaw. So if it is a gift and or grant coming from the tribe, please make sure it's properly spelled out on the CD and make sure that also is reflected on the McCaw so that we are aware of that. If it is a tribal loan, make sure that you are including all the mortgage for it, the note, the information for that loan. In most cases, those may be forgivable within that 5-year period, but we still need that to review. So please make sure that we're receiving copies of that as well. Otherwise, it would delay you on receiving that loan guarantee certificate. Moving on 2 slides. And the next one. Okay, so what you're seeing there on your screen now is the next item that should appear on your or in your endorsement package, which is the initial and your final 1003. A lot of times we'll receive the final or we'll receive the initial. We do need both of those for review. All pages do need to be signed by the borrower. And then in addition to the 1003, we do have the addendum to the 1003, which is HUD Form 501111. I mentioned that earlier, and I'm going to show you a sample of this. That specific question needs to be answered as far as whether they're a first-time home buyer or not. That addendum to the application does need to be signed. Moving on to the next slide, I did want to talk about briefly on the 1003s some areas that I do see missing. If it is a joint application, on page 1 of the 1003, we need that signed by all parties that are involved there. So please make sure that we are getting that signed. And then another section that is often missing is the HMDA information. even if they're choosing not to disclose, you know, we need to have the proper and appropriate boxes checked. On the page 4, moving on to the next slide, is your addendum to the 1003, which is the HUD form 501111. Now, real quick on this, this particular form, what I do see often in the package is the 92900s in there. The 92900s they're fine to be in there, but you definitely still need your addendum to the loan application for Section 184. On that particular application, or on the addendum, what I see missing is that question, first-time home buyer, yes or no. We do need that filled out. And then the next section below that, where they are identifying the type of loan, whether it's a streamlined with appraisal, without, that's often not marked. And then over on page 3 of it, item 16, you know, in particular 16C, if they've had a Section 184 guaranteed loan in the past, yes or no. These boxes, for some reason, seem to come in often not checked. So please make sure when you're packaging these endorsement packages that you're double checking those and making sure that they're properly indicated. Following the the addendum uniform application is the CAVERS printout. We actually do want the printout from CAVERS. We all know what they look like, which is the sample that you see there. Please take the time. The other thing that should be followed with the CAVERS is the LDP GSA. We need to review those documentation, make sure there's no disallowed parties in there. So please make sure that we are including these. If they're not included, we're going to delay on getting you that loan guarantee certificate. Going on to the next slide is, first thing I wanted to talk about is the credit report. With the credit report, we're going to look at particularly the entirety of the credit report, but we're also going to look at the date on that credit report. We're going to compare that to the closing date. We want to make sure that if it's aged, which happens, we're going to want to see an update to that credit report. We want to make sure that there weren't any other loans taken out that would hamper the individual from making this mortgage payment. So please make sure that you're double checking the dates and on the credit report and any supporting documentation. With the supporting documentation, if we do have letters of explanation, please make sure those are signed and dated by the borrower as well. And when you're sending those in, verification of mortgage. If it's not reporting on the credit report, we do need a VOM. So please, when you're doing, particularly with the refis, and you know they may have had a property they sold, we do want to see that VOM either on the credit report or we need to see a supplement to that. Now, some documents are not necessarily going to be included in every single file. For example, any divorce decrees or separation agreements. But if they are, if there's indication there is a divorce on there, we're going to need to see that divorce decree, just like the underwriter would, to make sure that there is no alimony or anything that could change the material facts of the loan. Child support documentation. Child support documentation, same thing. If the individual is paying that child support, we're going to need to see that as well. Or if they're receiving it and they're using it for qualification purposes, we need to know how long is it likely going to continue. Student loan verification information. So we do when we do our calculations and how the underwriters will do theirs is they're going to do a fully amortized payment on those student loans. If it's reporting on the credit report, great. If not, we do use the 1% rule. So 1% of that, that outstanding balance of that student loan. On refinances, when we receive the endorsement package, a lot of times there's no payoff statement in there. If you review the information that we need for refinance, we do need the payoff statement. We also need the most recent mortgage statement in there. So please make sure that's included. And then, of course, if there's a subordination tribal agreement involved, we're going to need that. And then, finally, on the verification of rent, as I mentioned before, that's where I often see where there's rent being paid, but then on the McCall, there's nothing inputted on there, which causes that delay on getting that loan guarantee certificate. Moving on to the next slide is your asset documentation. So we do need verification of the deposits. So if they have an EMD of $5,000, we do need proof of that being received. We also need the paper trail in regards to it coming out. So the bank statement, if it's coming out of the bank statement, we have to be able to see that that EMD did come out of their funds. Gift letters. If they are receiving a gift from the family members, we do need to see the gift letter in there. We need to see the transaction from the gift funds to the borrower, and we need to see the gifter's ability to give that gift. So usually it's one or two of those that may be missing. So just so we're aware, we need those three sources in there. Bank statements. Please make sure with the bank statements that they are not aged. We have to be able to make the same determination that the underwriter made. And sometimes I'll see that those are aged. If they happen to be aged, please make sure we get them updated before you send this in for endorsement. On the next slide, with the income, we'll start with the 30-day pay stubs, or pay stubs covering 30 days. Again, what we're looking at, of course, is that the income is calculating correctly, and that if there's any aged pay stubs, we're going to request any updates to those. On we do require the previous 2 years of W-2s, which, if it's a copy of a copy, it sometimes gets a little more difficult to read, so please make sure they are clear and crisp for our being able to read those. Now, the next bullet point that you see there is signed previous 2 years federal tax returns. We do still require signed tax returns, so please make sure that those are included in your files. The following bullet that you see there is the per capita documentation. So if someone is receiving their per cap, please make sure that proof of that per cap is in there, whether it be the awards letter and then proof of the account that it's going into, or if it's going to be actual issued 1099s or W-2s. Please make sure that that per cap is documented so we can utilize that income if it is being used. Followed by that is the signed 4506T. So we do need the signed version in there. And then following that is the actual transcript, the last 2 years federal transcripts. Obviously, currently we have the COVID-19 direction that everybody did receive on those. And as Jeff had mentioned earlier, if these files are closing during this situation, please make sure we're documenting the COVID-19 files. Finally is the written verification of employment, which I know everybody's been doing 10 days prior, and of course there's been directions on that. Now, this does not include everything that could be that the underwriter wanted for income documentation. Maybe self-employed individuals, you know, have an 1120, and so the underwriter is going to have those in there. Whatever the underwriter has determined on those calculations, we're going to want to see as well. Okay. Moving on to the next slide. That actually completes our right side of the binder. So we're going to go ahead and shift on into the left side. Over on the left side, the first item that should be up there is a fully executed contract with any company documentation, of course, if this is a purchase. Now, one thing that I do see is when it comes to the addendas, what I often see is a situation where the close of escrow took place after that contract has expired. And we have to come back and ask for that addenda that extended that escrow. And, you know, we receive them back from our lenders. Let's just make sure that those are included. That's the one thing that I see that's commonly missed is the addendas coming in. Followed by that, if it again is a purchase, the mandatory clause executed by all parties and the real estate certificate executed by all parties. Now, when it comes to the mandatory clause and the real estate certificate, the one thing that I just wanted to point out is we do understand that some MLSs and some jurisdictions out there have incorporated the mandatory clause and the real estate certificate into their purchase agreements. If that's the case, what would help the expediting the review is if you just highlighted those sections in the contract. So when you send that file in, the loan specialist can easily, quickly identify that you don't necessarily need those separate documents, but that it is included in the contract because that particular jurisdiction has made that decision. And then, of course, when you have, say, for example, a rehab, we're going to be looking for that mortgagee assurance of completion. Moving on to the next slide. What you see there is just the sample HUD, FHA, a mandatory clause and real estate certificate. Now, this can be obtained off of HUD clips if you don't have one in your jurisdiction or your software. But a lot of times it's already there in the contract, but there might be a delay in just identifying it, or it's missing it, and we just need to get that. So I just wanted to show you a sample of one that you could utilize. On the next slide is we're going to move into the appraisal or the comprehensive evaluation. The first item we're going to look at that is of course, the appraisal itself, the 1004. Now, one thing that I've noticed when we receive these is there might be some misprints, some information that's not in there correctly. Borrower's name might be misspelled. The lender might be different because for whatever reason. So we do need to make sure that these appraisals are coming in after they have been reviewed by the lender and that any corrections that have taken place have been done, so we're getting that final product. If it is a condominium, we do need evidence that it is an approved project through FHA, or if it's an approved project through the Alaska Housing Authority. We do allow or accept the Alaska Housing Authority even if FHA had not approved it yet. Manufactured homes. If it is a manufactured home, we do need an engineer's report. Many times I'll have to stop the review or put on the deficiency request asking for that engineer's report. So please make sure that that is in the file. Now, commonly you're going to have the location maps, photographs, building sketch. They're going to be included inside the appraisal. But that just goes back to what I was saying before. Please make sure we're getting the final product of that appraisal in its entirety. Now, if it was subject to some repairs or subject to completion, we do need the proper documentation, whether that's the 1004D, whatever the jurisdiction that this loan is closing in requires, the 92051 HUD form. Please make sure that's included as well. So look on that appraiser as that appraisal as you're building this endorsement package, and if it is checked subject to, you know that we're going to need that additional documentation signed off that the work had been completed. Evidence of again, the 1004D. The other thing that we're going to look on the next slide is the wood destroying inspection infestation report, commonly known as the NPMA 33, or state mandated. Now, there's been a lot of questions on what we require on pest inspections, so hopefully this will clear this up. We are going to ask for, if the buyers and sellers have it in the contract that there's going to be a pest inspection, we're going to want to see that. If the appraiser notates or calls for an inspection, we're going to want to see that. And then finally, if the local jurisdiction or state that this transaction is closing in requires it, we're going to ask for it, with the exception of the state of Oklahoma. We do a majority of our transactions in Oklahoma. At this time, we are still requiring a pest inspection and clearance from the state of Oklahoma on any of those purchase transactions. So hopefully that clears that up. Hazard insurance. Please make sure we're going to double check that the policy is in effect and it's going to be identifying that it is the property and borrower that it is tied to this transaction. I know you've had a lot of files that come through your office, and sometimes these are just those situations that they're not the correct document in there, and I just have to ask for it. Flood certification. All transactions do require the flood certification to be ran and included for our review, so please make sure that we are still including those. If the property is deemed that it does require flood insurance, this is another thing that there's been some confusion over. Just want to make sure that we're clear. Private flood insurance is not permitted on Section 184 loans. The company must be participating in the government-backed National Flood Insurance Program, often commonly known as the NFIP. So please make sure that if it is deemed that it's in a flood zone, that the proper documentation is there. Now, on the reservation of funds, Roy had mentioned when it comes to that breakout of that payment, it is a monthly basis of taking the hazard and the flood insurance, totaling it, dividing by 12. We just need to know what that total monthly is. Another point of confusion has been on when are we going to look at well inspection and sewer septic tank inspection. So on a purchase transaction, again, if the appraiser has notated something, we're going to want to see those reports. The other case that would call for those reports, if the property is vacant. So you have the person purchasing a vacant property. It's on a well, it's on a septic tank. We are going to want to see the report for those. So please make sure that those are included. If it's occupied, we're not going to call for those. But if it's vacant, we don't want the borrower going into a home and a month later finding out that there may be an issue with the septic tank and they have to get it addressed, which can be costly and jeopardize being able to make those payments. So please make sure if it's a vacant property and it's on a septic or a well, we do require those reports to be included. The next slide that you'll see come up is the sample that you can get off of HUD clips for the wood destroying inspection report. Again, most jurisdictions, most counties have their own specific form. We're okay with that, but if they don't, then there is one supplied on HUD clips that the inspector can utilize. Moving on to the next slide. New construction or less than 1 year old. So inside that documentation, what commonly does happen that causes a delay on receiving this back is whether or not the builder certificate, which is HUD form 92541, that is required in every file to be completed and signed on a new construction or less than 1 year old. We also need the builder's 1 year warranty. So the HUD form 92544. Again, these documents can be obtained off of HUD clips for your use, but we do need those included. Now, in some situations, you might have a early start letter in there. So you have a situation that the build needs to get started, but the appraisal hasn't been done. You need to have your early start letter in there so that we are aware of that. Moving on, evidence of a 10-year warranty. Again, that's not required, but it's sometimes there. One thing is if you have a rehab or a new construction, is the inspections completed by the local authority, or if this is a tribal trust or on tribe land, the tribe may have their specific requirements for those 3 inspections, which we, of course, do honor the tribe's process. We also need the building permit and certificate of occupancy. Now, again, we have some situations that that particular county or that tribe may not issue the same certificate of occupancy that we're used to seeing. So we want to just make sure that we have that clearance that that person can, occupy that property. So whatever documentation that the tribe has determined is what we will accept. Moving on, and I won't go into too much detail, but here are the samples on the next slide of the building certificates. Again, you can obtain those off of HUD clips. And then the next slide after that is the warranty of completion, the HUD form 92544. Again, easily obtained off of the HUD clips. Moving on with the less than 1 year, we do need any FHA compliance inspections, footing and grills. Subterranean, we've already covered briefly, but the subterranean termite report, which is MPC 99A and B. One thing I did not talk about on the riders is if it is a construction loan, we do need the construction rider. So we want to make sure that that is included inside there, and I've given you a link that you can obtain the sample of that construction rider as well. If it is a single close or rehab, we are going to be looking for evidence of that interest-bearing escrow account. And on the single close, acknowledgement, signed and confirmed and executed by the borrowers. So we're going to be looking for that. We also, on the construction or rehab, going to be looking for that construction loan agreement, again, signed, confirmed, and executed. And as before, in the less than 1 year, we're going to be looking at the construction rider to be included inside this package. The following slide is the subterranean protection guarantee. Again, this can be obtained off of HUD clips. And the following example that you see after that is the single close applicant acknowledgement form that must be included as well. And then the next sample that comes up on your screen is the construction loan rider that I gave you a link that you can obtain that to be included inside the package. The final section on this that we're going to talk about is the title work for these files. If it is a fee simple, we need the preliminary title report. We're going to review that, of course, look for any, if it's a refi or any judgments that may affect the titling of this, we're going to be taking a look at that. If it is a tribal trust land, we're going to be looking for the land jurisdiction form, which is HUD form 50114, and we're going to be looking for a true certified copy of the current lease with all signatures. The tribes have already submitted those leases to us. We do have them on record, but we do want to make sure that the underwriter is reviewing that lease and that is included for our review as well, to make sure we have the most up-to-date one. The next section is the TSR that is recorded with the BIA. Now, one quick note, actually we'll move on to the next slide, and I'll make a note about that. We will review these files on your initial TSR that you received, as long as it's less than 6 months on lending on tribal land. The process, I'm sure you're all aware, is you order that TSR through the BIA Realty office and they obtain it, the first TSR. Underwriter needs that previous to underwriting the loan, so it needs to be in that package. We're going to also want to be able to look at that. After the TSR has been received and the underwriter completes their loan and approval, that's when you can move forward to issuing the firm commitment, which is valid for 60 days. The next section is after the loan closed, and what I wanted to talk about is you can send that package in. We will review that package pending that final TSR to be received. Once when you receive that final TSR, you will send that in so that we can complete the final review of the file and issue your loan guarantee certificate. The purpose behind that is we want to be able to facilitate getting these issued in a timely manner. So if we review that package and there happens to be some income documentation, credit documentation that we want to double check, you may already have it, so we can request and issue that deficiency request asking for it. Then when we receive this final TSR, we'll be able to go ahead and issue your loan guarantee certificate. Now, one of the reasons that land status, going on to the next slide, one of the reasons that is important is determining the type of loan that you're doing. And when you send it in, that's how we know, what you've determined as the lender, if it's going to be an individual trust, allotted land, or fee simple. So please make sure that that is included on your tribal trust. The following and final things that I wanted to just touch on is the residential lease of tribal-owned land, which is on the next slide, actually the next few slides. This is a sample that you can obtain off of Section 184's lender site. The reason that I wanted to be able to provide this and let you know where you can obtain this is some of the lenders are just now starting to do some tribal trust lands, and they may not be quite familiar with the what they're looking for in the lease. This is a sample. This is not required to be used by the tribes. This was just to give some clear direction on going forward that tribes were establishing those leases. The actual one that the tribe had established, they'd already sent in, they should have already sent in and already been reviewed and approved with HUD as well, so they've come to an agreement on that. But here's a sample for the newer teams that are just starting to do those tribal trust lands. And with that, what I did include in the presentation here is a couple slides on is contact information for the office. So what you have is Chris's direct contact information. Of course, are happy that our new Deputy Director, Jeff, is on board with his contact, and then all the others. And that wraps up my part. What I'd like to do is pass this or open this up for questions, and we'll go from there.
Hi, this is Krista. Thank you, Brian. That was great. There was a lot of information there. I'd really like to take, and I'm sure you would too, just a 10-minute break, let you guys get something to drink, use the facilities, whatever you need to do for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and work on these questions. But before I do, I want to just make one other point on that land status and jurisdiction document. That document must be completed by the tribe. The lender is responsible for obtaining that, but you need to reach out to the tribe and get them to complete that information for your property. All right, it is, I have 1:32, so let's come back at 1:42, and then we will pick up with some questions. All right, thank you. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I know that was just a short break, and we're really taxing you with a 3-hour presentation today and also tomorrow, but we really appreciate you hanging in there. Let's move to the questions really quick and see if we can get those answered, and then we'll move on to the servicing portion of the training we'll start today. All right. Neil?
Thank you, Chris. We have a number of questions that have come in the chat. As a reminder, if you'd like to submit a question, open up your chat in the bottom right-hand corner of the webinar, and you can submit it in that chat box. The first question we have comes from one of our participants, and the question reads, what if the COB is not a tribal member? Do they still need to be listed?
So the COB would be a co-borrower, and absolutely, if the co-borrower is a part of this, if you have a co-borrower and they're part of this loan, they do need to be listed. We do ask that the tribal member go into first position on your loan application. However, that is really the only requirement. Right. Next question.
Excellent. The next question reads, for the test cases, the DG underwriter and DG trainer, is this our UW testing and HUD DG reviewer?
So, Brian, why don't you take that one?
Sure. So within our lenders, we've identified the lenders that a particular underwriter, a senior underwriter, has been designated as a DG trainer. So that within those lenders, the test case phases would go through along with that DG trainer inside the lender. The package needs to come in and mark that it is a test case review because I am designated as the DG trainer within HUD, so that particular file will come to me for review. Now, if it is a situation that you are a test case underwriter and you don't have a designated DG trainer within your lending institution, then I act as the DG trainer for you. So when you're ready to issue your firm commitment, if you noticed on the submission commitment form or the submission contact form, it was listed for fee commitment or endorsement package. That's when you would circle that fee commitment, so that is designated that I would review that file for you.
Thank you, Brian. I see that we have a number of questions that have popped up about the availability of the slide deck and will there be a recording for this webinar, and I'm happy to share that there will be a recording that will be posted. Krista, do you have a timeline for when you think that recording will be available?
I'm sure that it'll be up by the beginning of next week. I believe they need a few days to get it together, and we'll post it just as quickly as it is available. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yep. Our next question reads, we have submitted 6 loans electronically. These were paper files previously submitted but resubmitted as instructed after COVID-19 about 2 weeks ago. We have submitted through our share file and have not received any notification that they were open. Is it acceptable? Is it an acceptable form of delivery, and can we expect a response on these? At this point, we aren't sure if our files have been received.
Thank you so much for that comment. Jeff is going to talk a little bit more about their lender letters that we've sent out recently, where we have asked for some accommodations by you and those that we've had to make through this COVID-19 national emergency. So I do thank you for resubmitting those packages in, and we are, as you might guess, a little backlogged. We're trying to work through all the technology challenges, but I think that, Jeff, we can probably check for those specific files if you want to send an email to jeffrey.b.glass@hud.gov. He can check those specific files for you to make sure that we have received them.
Excellent. Okay. We do have a few more questions that have come in. The next question reads, is there an official stacking order we can use?
All right. We do have our stacking order, I believe, on our Code Talk Section 184 lender site. And if you're not able to locate that there, we'll be happy to send you an email and let you know where it's located.
Excellent. Okay. The next question that we have reads, what are the requirements with regard to detitling manufactured homes?
Brian, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so the requirements for detailing manufactured homes is determined by your local jurisdiction as far as changing that from the chattel property into, and then of course the real property once when it's been properly inspected and put on place. So I would have to refer you to that local jurisdiction on detitling that manufactured home.
Thank you, Brian. Yep, we have one or two more questions here in the chat, and we will have time for additional questions later on in today's webinar. So if you aren't able to get your question addressed during this break, we'll have time again later. The next question I see reads, if the credit report expires after funding but before it gets insured, is a soft pull credit report acceptable?
Brian, that sounds like your department too.
Could you read that question again?
Happily, yeah. So the question reads, if the credit report expires after funding but before it gets insured, is a soft pull credit report acceptable?
So in regards to that, we're going to be looking at those dates based on when the underwriter approved the loan. And then, of course, after you close a transaction, you have 30 days to deliver that package into HUD for our review. So when it comes to that particular date, we're not going to come back and say we're going to want a soft pull as long as it's meeting the requirements when that underwriter did approve the loan.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Just for a time check, Krista, do we have time for an additional question here, or would you like to go ahead and jump into the next section?
Let's jump into the next section, and then we'll move on to do more questions at the end if we don't run out of time. I do want you to understand that we will respond to all of the questions, provide a list of the questions that were asked and the appropriate responses after this training has been completed tomorrow. All right. So let's begin with the next phase of our training today. We're going to talk about the Section 184 servicing. Next slide, Neil. Okay, I believe Heidi is not on the line, but I'm happy that she was able to join us and welcome you all earlier. Next slide, that's me. Go on to the next one. So you have, again, this is our staff. I really want you guys to, get to know them, at least see them. I know it's not the same as seeing them in person, which would have been absolutely great to be able to visit with all of you in person, answer questions, just kind of interact with you, but unfortunately we are not able to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Jeffrey, and he's going to take it from here, he and Selma. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Krista. Hello again, everyone. To those that are just joining us, good afternoon. With the COVID-19 emergency, the Office of Loan Guarantee is working tirelessly to support all of our tribal housing partners as we deal with the impact of COVID-19 as a nation. The safety and security of Native American families, tribal housing partners, and all in Indian country is our top priority. Due to the impact of the pandemic on the financial well-being of businesses and individuals and the conduct of normal business operations, the Office of Loan Guarantee has issued the following guidance. Dear Lender Letter 2020-02 was our initial correspondence to lenders in response to COVID-19, and it basically pointed you to our existing loss mitigation options to help provide solutions to any borrowers impacted by COVID-19. These options can be found in ONAP's Section 184 Processing Guidelines. Next slide, please. Dear Lender Letter 2020-03, now that was in response to Section 184 staff having to quickly shift to telework as a result of COVID-19, and it provided instructions to lenders on the submission of endorsement and claim packages to ONAP through secure email. You can see on the slide we have the two email inboxes to submit either your endorsement packages or your claims packages to. And in addition to that, on April 2nd, an additional email was sent out that directed lenders to send in duplicate in-process files for any paper files that were shipped prior to April 2nd. That was so that we could have access to those paper files that we had already began processing the endorsement and claims on, as well as any paper files that may have come in prior to us actually being able to start work on those. So we wanted to make sure we covered everything. So we did request that you send in duplicate files and instructed that you do note in the title of those packages that you submit by email to make sure you indicate that it is a duplicate in-process file. Let's see. The next slide, please. The next letter that went out, Dear Lender Letter 2020-4, was in response to the presidentially declared national emergency declaration, and this letter notified lenders of a moratorium on foreclosures for properties secured by Sections 184 or 184A loans, a moratorium on evictions of persons from properties previously secured by Sections 184 or 184A loans where the lender has acquired title, and the extension of the first legal action and reasonable diligence timeframes to 60 days from the date of issuance. The next letter that we issued was Dear Lender Letter 2020-05, and this letter notifies stakeholders of flexibilities in re-verification of employment, exterior-only and desktop-only appraisal options, and IRS transcript requirements. And that Dear Lender Letter requirements cover the period through May 31st, covers the period through May 31st, 2020. And as you can see there, at the bottom of the slide also is a link to those Dear Lender letters that I definitely advise you to go and take a look at them and read them in detail so that you can know what the specifics that we did, the specific guidance that we issued. Of course, I'll be answering any questions about this later if you have. And without further ado, I do want to go ahead and introduce our presenter for the second half of the presentation today, Thelma Pillay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Most of you are already familiar with me. You've worked with me for a number of years, and I do want to also thank management again for making this training possible, given the circumstances that we're all currently living under. And so with that, I would like to get started with the training. The first thing is the purpose of the training. The Section 184 training provides guidance relating to HUD and the Office of Loan Guarantees requirements for lenders to utilize under the Section 184 program. The overview will provide servicing options and reiterate key differences when lending in Indian country. The training covers the importance of servicing Section 184 loans and Lender Announcement 2014-11, loss mitigation options, understanding the foreclosure process, property preservation, over allowables and extensions, variance requests, and the claims process. Lenders are expected to make a concerted effort to understand the tribal trust land type, the role of the lender and servicer to avoid the foreclosure or assignment of a HUD guaranteed mortgage or mortgages to HUD, understanding reasonable diligence timelines, and the role of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureaus, the regulations X and Z. So what makes servicing different in Indian country? Land ownership. We have fee simple land, tribal trust land, allotted or individual trust land, allotted trust land with fractionated ownership, and land assignment. Next slide. Land ownership. Let's talk about this. Fee simple land is land that is located within a reservation and restricted fee land. Continue to the next slide. Hawaiian homelands, Section 184A. The Hawaiian Homes Commission Act of 1920 as amended set aside lands in Hawaii known as Hawaiian homelands. These lands are held in trust for the benefit of eligible Native Hawaiians. Next slide. Reservations are land type, reservation land and land ownership. We have allotted trust land, which is one of the types of land that we receive a number of questions for over the years. Allotted trust lands are held in trust for use of individual Indians or their heirs. Again, the federal government holds the title and the individual or heirs holds the beneficial interest. The land assignment. What is the land assignment? A land assignment is the temporary possessory interest of tribal trust land granted to an individual. The next slide. Fee simple land. Reservation. This is reservation land that is no longer in trust or subject to a restriction. It usually refers to reservation land owned by non-Indians, sometimes a tribe or individual tribal member, and has land in fee. What is tribal trust land? Tribal trust land is where the federal government holds title to the land in trust on behalf of the tribe. Next slide. Restricted fee land. This is land that is held by a tribe or person subject to a restriction against selling or giving the property to anyone else. Checkerboard reservation, another land ownership type on the reservation that has created a lot of questions over the years. This is land ownership that is intermingled between fee simple, trust land, and allotted trust, resulting in a checkerboard. Next slide. Who can service 184 loans? Lenders approved to participate in the Direct Guarantee Program are also approved to service Section 184 loans. Organizations wishing to purchase and service Section 184 loans must apply to HUD for approval. The next slide. What are HUD servicing rules? Lenders must comply with the servicing requirements set forth by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I'm sure that all of you are familiar with these types. In addition, lenders must comply with Public and Indian Housing Notice 2014-11 and the ONAP Lender Communication Lender dated April 30, 2019. If you need a copy of either of these documents, please contact us. The next slide. Servicing reporting. Lenders must submit to HUD a Section 184 and 184A portfolio report. This report must include all active, paid in full, and defaulted loans. The defaulted report outlines the loss mitigation programs being utilized, especially if a borrower is in bankruptcy and where the case is in the foreclosure process. The next slide. What's required for servicing file retention? All servicing files, including loan origination documents, must be retained for the life of the mortgage plus 3 years. Upon verbal or written request, the mortgagee shall make hard copies of servicing information available to HUD staff within 3 business days when requested. The next slide. Servicing and performing loans. This slide provides a summary of the provisions that are covered in Regulation X. And Regulation X covers escrow accounts, servicing transfers, error resolutions and information requests, force-placed insurance, continuity of contact with the borrowers, loss mitigation procedures. The next slide. Regulation Z. Regulation Z covers the following. ARM disclosures. Of course, you know that ARMs are not offered for the Section 184 or 184 loans, but this is what this particular regulation covers. Escrow cancellation notices, prompt payment crediting, and the prohibition of pyramiding, payoff statements, and transfer disclosures, and periodic statements. Again, as a reminder, adjustable rate mortgages are not available for the Section 184 and 184A programs. The next slide. Assumptions. The assumptions are allowable for 184 and 184A loans. And this may require approval by the tribe, the BIA, or DHHL. The lender is to process and recommend for approval using standard 184 and 184 guidelines. The lender must send to HUD for final determination, decision on that package, and those are the assumptions that Brian will actually review. They also requires the release of liability for the current borrower, which is one of the things that has been a problem over the years as well. Once this process is completed, HUD will issue an updated loan guarantee certificate. Next slide. The notifications to HUD. Change of servicer. When servicing is transferred, the selling mortgagee notifies HUD within 15 days of the transfer on a form HUD 92080. This is a requirement. The loan is paid in full. The lender and the servicer must notify HUD by letter when the loan is paid off and submission of also the required documentation, counting out the note, the mortgage, the Section 184 rider, the title policy, and or a copy of the title status report if it's tribal trust land. In addition, They must move the paid-off loan from the active servicing report to the paid-off report. That means that in your reporting, you can have a separate tab in which you can actually put those paid in full loans there as well, and just most of you notice have labeled it PIF, paid in full. So you have that option of doing that or including them in the regular reporting, and we will sort the report, but the report must be set up so that HUD can sort it and separate those paid in full loans from all the other active loans. But we would actually prefer that you create a separate tab and include those paid in full loans. The next tab, still servicing non-performing loans. A successful servicing strategy treats each delinquent mortgager individually. And based on the circumstances involved, custom tailors a foreclosure prevention workout plan that will be successful in curing the delinquency and preventing a foreclosure. Early determination of the reason for the delinquency gives the servicer and the mortgager time to arrange an acceptable method for curing that default. What is prompt action? You need to, prompt action is required at all stages after a delinquency has occurred. Next slide. Early intervention. Upon default or imminent default, mortgagees shall engage in loss mitigation actions for the purpose of providing an alternative to foreclosure. And we know that this sometimes requires a lot of work. So, but at a minimum, the servicer must establish or make a good faith effort to establish live contact with the borrower or the borrowers by the 36th day of default and promptly inform them of loss mitigation options that may be available to them. Written notification must be given by the 45th day to the borrowers. Many tribes in this instance may have funds available to assist their tribal members that are experiencing difficulty making their mortgage payments. So the servicer should always suggest to the borrower to reach out to the tribe to see if assistance may be available. The next slide. Servicing loss mitigation applications. When servicers receive a timely loss mitigation application, here's what needs to happen. Servicers must acknowledge receipt of the application and inform the borrower whether the application is complete or incomplete, evaluate a complete loss mitigation application, and they must notify the borrower of the result of the servicer's evaluation, including determination of the loss mitigation options available to the borrower or why loss mitigation options were not approved, and notify them of with an appeal process as well. The Section 184 program does not require servicers or the owner of a mortgage loan to offer any specific loss mitigation option. And HUD does not require servicers to use any particular criteria to evaluate borrowers for loss mitigation. Next slide. The financial analysis. Loss mitigation generally defined as the process of trying to prevent a foreclosure and keeping the homeowner in their home, as a reminder to everyone. HUD expects servicers to analyze the borrower's surplus monthly income and to use reasonable business judgment to determine if the borrower has the capacity to repay the arrearages. And servicers must evaluate the borrower's monthly to see if anything has changed in terms of the status. The next slide. When a borrower submits a loss mitigation application and is approved 90 days or more before foreclosure sale, the servicer must give the borrower 14 days to accept or reject a loss mitigation offer. When a borrower submits a loss mitigation application and is approved less than 90 days but more than 37 days before foreclosure sale, servicers must give the borrower 7 days or more to accept or reject that loss mitigation offer. And the loss mitigation application is defined as an oral or written request. When you receive a loss mitigation application 45 days or more before foreclosure, and also if you receive a complete loss mitigation application 37 days or more before the foreclosure sale, it must be reviewed. Next slide. The appeals process. Everyone is familiar with the appeals process with the borrowers. You've done this over a period of time. The appeal process is limited to denial of a loan modification, and the lender is not required for other loss mitigation programs. HUD strongly suggests that the lender review other options if it is still early in the default timeline and you are able to still continue to work with the borrower. The appeal must include an independent evaluation. That means servicers cannot use the same personnel who evaluated the application to review the appeal. Supervisors can review appeals so long as they were not directly involved in the initial evaluation of the borrower's complete loss mitigation application. Within 30 days of a borrower making an appeal, servicers must notify the borrower of any decision to offer or reject the loan modification option that is the subject of the appeal. Servicers must give the borrower at least 14 days to accept or reject an offer of a loss mitigation option resulting from the appeal, after the servicer provides this notice to the borrower. Next slide. And that concludes my first half for today. So if there are any questions, please submit them through the chat line.
All right. Thank you, Thelma. That was great. A lot of information there, run through very quickly, but I know that all of you participating in this call today are familiar with CFPB requirements, and it was great, Thelma, for you to refresh our knowledge regarding the land types that we're servicing. So I want to go back and we'll answer some questions. However, Neil, can we go back to slide 4? I see that there's been a question that came in for us to, for me to tell you a little bit more about our staff and what they do and what their job responsibilities are. So we're going back here to slide 4 so you can see everybody. So Jake Corey, he is a Native American loan specialist, and he is primarily assigned to working on the Title VI program. Title VI is another loan guarantee program that's run out of this office that is primarily focused on economic development on tribal reservations and off-tribal reservations, but in Indian country. So Jake primarily services that portfolio. He does help out on doing endorsements and actually lots of other things. He's a very valuable member of our group. Roy Schaefer, he is a senior loan guarantee specialist, and he's been with us since the fall. And Roy's responsible for lender approval, and he also heads up the monitoring that we do of lenders. he also works on the loan guarantee endorsement reviews. Andrika Wagstaff, she's one of our senior folks that's been around here a really long time with OLG, just like me. And she works on the claims. She's very much primary responsibility for working on the review of the claim files that are submitted. Andrika does also focus on our tribal trust transactions. She's our tribal trust expert. She looks at those TSRs. She makes sure they're correct. And she also reviews endorsement files. Mansour Dean, he is another newer staff member that came on in the fall. And he is a loan guarantee specialist. And he has been working on the endorsements and a lot of other special projects working with me. He's also done the monitoring, and he has, again, multitasking, lots of responsibilities. Brian Cook, as you know, is a senior loan guarantee specialist, and he's our DG underwriting specialist. He also reviews test cases. He does the endorsements. And he serves as another vital role here at OLG. He's been with us since the summer. Kevin Hickey is one of our newer employees. He's a loan guarantee specialist also, and he has taken on lots of responsibilities too. He's focusing on the endorsement reviews. He's working with Jake on Title VI, getting some policy straight. And he also is a great addition to our staff. As you know, Thelma Flay, she's been with us. She's also been here, she's been here the longest, maybe, Thelma, with the Office of Loan Guarantee. She focuses on the servicing aspect of the program. She reviews your extension requests, over-allowable requests. She also reviews endorsement files. Jeff Glass is our deputy director, as we've said before, and he's overseeing the day-to-day operations of the office. All staff members spend time opening and reviewing those emails that you sent for case numbers and cohort numbers. So amongst their other challenges and responsibilities each day, they try to provide you with that 24-hour turnaround on your requests that come into that email box. Although we have a lot more staff members than we did, we were down to 4 previously, we still don't have quite enough folks to get through all of the work. And as I mentioned previously, we have had some challenges with this COVID-19, as I'm sure you all have too. But we're working through it, and we're making great progress. We have great staff, and we're happy to have them all on board. All right, Neil, let's turn to the questions and see what we can answer.
Excellent. Thank you, Krista. Yeah, we've had a number of questions come in through the chat box. The first question reads, can you provide for us a good address to send a service transfer letter? The current address we have is being shown as undeliverable.
Oh, goodness. Okay, our address in Washington is HUD-ONAP-servicing at 451 7th Street Southwest, and that's room 4108, and it's Washington, D.C., 20410. Now, I'm also going to share the email address where you send your servicing reports, and you can send the servicing transfer letters there. You can also send your payoff documentation there. It's 184 servicing at HUD.gov, HUD.gov. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, the next question reads, where does the lender send HUD Form 92080 to report a servicing transfer or is there a better email address that we should use?
Right, so we just answered that same question. That is same mailing address works, or the email address that I provided, 184servicing@hud.gov.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, the next question reads, we don't normally receive response to our monthly investing report. Where would we find feedback if there are any issues?
Well, actually, you should be seeing some updates from us in the near future on the report. We do have some discrepancies and things of that we've found, and so we hope to be able to put out guidance in the very near future on what our expectations are with respect to the servicing report. So stay tuned for that.
Perfect. The next question reads, can you walk us through the process to make one of our staff a delegated underwriter?
All right. Brian, are you on the phone still? Can you answer that process, or do you want to send an email?
He may have stepped away. Oh, are you there, Brian?
Well, he may be on mute. So we will respond to you with that instructions through an email.
Perfect. Okay, so the next question reads, can you explain, can you type the address and email addresses into the chat box? And we can, yes, we can do that, and we can also follow up by email after today's webinar. So there are a few more people that wanted to also get the address and email addresses that, Christy, you just shared. So we can definitely mark it down as a follow-up item. Okay, I see two more questions here in the box. Will tomorrow's session be covering new material, or will it repeat and more thoroughly cover the information that was covered today?
The session tomorrow will be additional information regarding servicing, and then it will also cover claim submissions.
Excellent. Okay, the next question here reads, there are times that we need to request for neighborhood watch lists. Where should we go to do this?
You should have access to that directly on your own, but I will also have Brian prepare that in our responses, and it will show you the link.
Perfect. The next question reads, can we also go over test case submissions sent by email due to COVID-19? We have sent a few from Caliber as test cases. However, our encrypted emails are not going through.
Okay. Why don't we work specifically with that particular individual or company on what the challenges are? We certainly can help you solve that. We'll do that offline. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, I see one more question here, and the question reads, if a previous loan servicer has not provided the 184 amortization with the transfer, is there a program that the new servicer can use to create one?
I'm not sure that I understand that question, so let me...
I believe it's for the... Chris, I'm sorry to interrupt. I believe it's for the amortization fee schedule is what they're saying when they transfer servicers.
That's correct.
Okay, okay. I don't have an answer for that. I'm not sure about... Yeah, it's a really good question. So let me figure out. I don't believe that, you know, that's something, if you purchased a loan, you should have received that original amortization schedule with your package with all of your documentation. If you're missing that documentation, It's possible we could possibly locate it, but I'm going to have to see. You know, we have almost 50,000 files in storage, and I'm not sure that we're going to be able to come up with that. So let me research that a little bit further and see if we can't find an answer that works for everyone.
Perfect. We do have a few more questions that have popped up. The next question reads, can you please advise where to go for the most up-to-date forms?
All right. I'm going to let Brian take that.
Okay, so the most up-to-date forms can be located on Code Talk. There would be where I would suggest that you go first. Code Talk does have a link on there for forms, which will then redirect you over to the lender web page of Section 184. Now, in regards to those forms, if there's any beyond that you're in need of, for example, the wood destroying pest forms, those can be located on HUD Clips. HUD Clips has a storage database of all forms that are issued. If you need that link, we will definitely have, when you receive this deck, that link is in the deck.
Thank you, Brian. We have one more question that just came in here. The question reads, thank you for going over staff roles and responsibilities. Will you be updating Code Talk to share these staff members' roles and responsibilities on the website?
I think that all of our contacts are there, and I would direct you to Jeffrey Glass for any inquiries that you have, specific inquiries. He will do the intake on your inquiry and assign the job or the request to the appropriate staff member as we go forward. We do, have varying roles, and we support in different areas for different things. So, again, your best response would be to reach out to Jeffrey Glass, and he will assist you in resolving whatever concerns you might have.
Great. We have two more questions that have just popped in. The next question reads, do you think that you will be extending out the COVID-19 moratorium timeframe?
I cannot say whether that will be extended, but I do want to mention that we will be providing sometime in the near future some additional guidance on the CARES Act and the COVID-19 national emergency. So do watch for that. We post all of our communications on the Code Talk website for lenders, and so you should be checking there regularly to see if there's any additional information that we might have put out. We do try to send it to our DG lenders who should be disseminating it to all of their lenders that they sponsor so that everyone stays well informed of what's going on. But the lenders can always access Code Talk and find the most up-to-date information.
Excellent. Okay, the next question reads, will there be a time allotted during the webinar for underwriting/guideline questions?
Unfortunately, these sessions were not meant to focus on underwriting. We will provide another session for specific underwriting training. These sessions are really about how you should package up your endorsement files, what we're finding as trends in missing documentation and things that are preventing us from completing the review the first time we look at it. And it's very important for you and for us to get a complete package so that when we review it, we just have to review it one time, and then we can move on to the next file. The delays from having to reach out to you by email, then receive your email, and then move on to try to go back and look at the file, where you have to refresh yourself on what the file, what the concerns were in the file. All of those things delay the process, and you can act in a vital role to cure that delay. And so we are hoping that you will do so that you'll get better service from us. In addition, we're talking about servicing. We want to be sure that particularly in this time when forbearance is being granted and loss mitigation will be given, we want to be sure that everybody knows what their roles and responsibilities are. We want to get servicing reports. Those are very, very important, so we want to make sure that all lenders that are servicing loans are sending them in on a monthly basis to us in the time frame that's required. And then we want to talk about claims. If the loan does go into default and we're having to dispose of the property, then we want to talk about what that process is and then how you can exercise your rights under the loan guarantee to be reimbursed for the costs associated with that. The whole point of us being in Indian country with you as a partner is for us to provide the security for you to feel comfortable to go and lend in Indian country on reservations. So we're here to do that, and we're asking you to provide all of the documentation necessary, and we are happy to reimburse you for those costs. So we do understand that underwriting review is going to be important. We just couldn't fit it all in these 2 sessions. But thank you for asking.
Perfect. I see we have a few more questions. One is a comment. The comment reads, this webinar was very helpful as our initial training didn't go into quite as much detail. Thank you so much for hosting. And then
thank you
next
so
question.
much.
Yeah. The next question here reads, do you have any updates with regard to the new LOS system? We're excited about how we could use it for uploading closed packages.
Yeah, that's really excited. I'm happy to report that we do have a new contractor for the LOS system, and we are actively engaged in updating the system so that we can begin bringing lenders on in the near future. So I think everybody's going to find that process really beneficial. And I look forward to being able to let you know that we're just about ready to do a rollout to all of our DG lenders. So do watch for communication. Do watch on Code Talk for some additional information as it begins to roll out. Thank you for asking. We're excited about LOS.
Okay, we just have one question remaining in the chat box, and this is just a clarifying question about underwriting. The question reads, when did you say that the next underwriting training would be scheduled for?
We don't have a date on the schedule yet, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to do it sooner than later. With the current pace that's happening with the COVID-19, I'm just really happy that we were able to deliver these 2 today. But I hear the interest, and I'm hoping that we can get it scheduled before long.
Well, I see we do have a couple more questions that have come in now. The next question reads, can we talk about Neighborhood Watch? I'm not sure if they want more clarification on the question.
Yeah, sure. That's a question that Brian can work with you directly on that offline, and we can walk through that process.
Perfect. Currently, that looks like all the questions that we have pending in the chat box.
All right. Thank you, Neil. I appreciate it. And thank you all for attending. We are ending a little bit early today, which is a good thing for everyone. I know you've been sitting for a long time. I hope that you did find the information valuable, and tomorrow when we begin again, we're going to review some additional servicing information, and then we will move on to claims to talk about how you submit files and what the file should contain. I appreciate you attending. I appreciate your continued support of Indian country, and I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow. Have a great afternoon.
That concludes our conference. Thank you for using AT&T Event Conference Enhanced. You may now disconnect.